The latest in YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates. This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Revi. On the gist today, we're looking at the India-France-UAE Trilateral with Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Welcome to all our viewers who are picking up this live stream, and welcome to those viewers who will watch this later on our YouTube channel. As we said, our expert analyst today is Ambassador Mohan Kumar, India's former envoy to France. Ambassador, good to see you, sir, after a while.
Thank you very much. Good to be on your show, Amitabh. Thank you.
I'm just looking at this trilateral initiative. Just wanted to get your take on the big picture, in terms of how not only India, but a lot of the world, in fact, is moving towards these multilaterals, plurilaterals, trilaterals, whatever you want to call them. I mean, why is that, and what's the relevance?
Okay, so thank you very much for that question, and I think it's a relevant question. I think there are three broad reasons, as I see it, as to why these minilaterals are now so popular. One of them is, I think it's no secret that multilateralism as embodied in the United Nations is become more and more ineffective over time. So, this is no secret. If you take, for example, the war in Ukraine, if you take other issues, the UN Security Council or the United Nations more broadly has not been able to perform. So there are countries actually which want to move away from multilateralism, not just because it is ineffective, but also because multilateralism tends to be cumbersome. You need to get consensus among 100 and odd countries. It then becomes the lowest common denominator among countries and so on. So for a variety of reasons, countries like India, which are not represented in the UN Security Council, and it's fair to say that we are not going to make it anytime soon because these multilateral fora are not willing to reform themselves. In this situation, countries like India, I think, which are middle powers, are left with very little choice except to look at minilaterals to achieve their diplomatic and strategic objectives. Now, this is true also for other countries, including those which can be members of the Security Council. After all, France is a member of the Security Council with a veto, and still France prefers to do things in a minilateral format. That should tell you that countries which are seeking to achieve results within a definite time frame and which want to look at like-minded countries to relentlessly push for achievement of strategic and diplomatic objectives will use the minilateral or the plurilateral format. They will avoid the multilateral format. So what you are seeing really is an exponential rise of minilaterals. You take any region now, there is bound to be a couple of minilaterals, if not more. So the broad background to this is, I would say, Amitabh, really the consummate failure of the multilateral model that we have.
Sure, I'm now just looking at one of the countries in this trilateral now, the UAE. India's been focusing bilaterally with the countries in West Asia, including the UAE, and a very strong relationship we have there. There was the I2U2 as well. Now, in this trilateral, one of the three legs of the tripod is UAE, which has extremely strong relationships with both India and France, apart from India and France having a very robust relationship.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. The other point I wanted to make about this particular minilateral, because it is located in the Gulf, and that is critical, the Middle East or the Gulf, whatever you want to call it. You will appreciate, Amitabh, that the United States is stretched strategically. The United States is already involved with the Russian war in Ukraine. The United States is countering China in the Pacific. The US cannot be seen to be doing everything all at the same time because it simply does not have the resources or the bandwidth to do it. So the US is also looking for like minded partners in the Middle East and the Gulf to achieve its objectives through its friends and partners. And therefore, you need to see the trilaterals, the plurilaterals in the Gulf against that background of United States pivoting to Asia. The US pivot to Asia, I think, is happening, and it has happened to some extent. And of course, the United States can't run away from Europe because you've got a war bang in the middle of Europe. For India, this is crucial because when I was ambassador in Bahrain, I used to be fond of saying that we have 8 million people who work in the Gulf, but we simply don't have any strategic footprint at all at the time. Since then, I think there has been a calculated attempt by India to have a strategic footprint in the Gulf. One is the I2U2, as you rightly mentioned. The second, I would talk about this minilateral. This is crucial also because France has a military base in UAE. It's the one place in the Middle East where France has a military base. So the strategic convergence between India, France, and UAE when it comes to the Gulf and the Middle East. For example, one, all three countries believe in pluralism and moderation. We have an agreed definition among ourselves on extremism and terrorism. We believe we have a role to play when it comes to having an interoperability in defense and security structures, plus our views on climate change, sustainability, tech transfer, they're all very similar. So, all in all, this trilateral, I think, will be able to punch far above its weight if the countries only did this bilaterally. So, I see great importance in my own assessment about what India and France and UAE can do in the Gulf if we pool our resources together and work with a framework on which we are all agreed that there is strategic convergence among the three players. So I see a lot of merit in why this is happening, and bear in mind that this is a very, very young trilateral. I mean, it got established only in September 2022, and that they've just had one other meeting. You will have to give it some time. But personally, Amitabh, I cannot overemphasize the importance of India having a strategic footprint in the Gulf. This is vitally important because we have 8 million people who work there and who send remittances back home. Second, we import the bulk of our oil purchases from there. So keeping the sea lanes of communication open, the idea of Indo-Pacific, the Indian Ocean, all of it is hugely important for India.
A quick message for our viewers. If you like this video and the subject that we've picked up to discuss, do hit the thumbs up button on YouTube and share the link as widely as possible. Since you're talking about it being a very young initiative of this trilateral ambassador, I mean, like you said, September 2022 on the sidelines of the UNGA when the three foreign ministers met. It's just been, what, 4-5 months? And they've already come up with the initiative and a roadmap and moving it forward. India and France, I mean, you were responsible for a lot of it. Not only the decades of our normal relationship, but it's approaching I think it's, is it the 25th year of the strategic partnership?
Yes, you are absolutely spot on. 1998, I will never forget the year because the very first Western country to establish a comprehensive strategic partnership with India after the nuclear tests of 1998. We were literally a pariah state when France established the first comprehensive strategic partnership with India. So you're quite right. That is, I think there's a 25th anniversary coming up. I think I have reiterated this several times before, but it's worthy of further reiteration. The one strategic partnership that India has, which is with France, is perhaps the only one which is free of any major irritants. There are no major irritants or problems between France and India. And I think it is well recognized that there is a high degree of comfort level that India has with France, which it may or may not have with several other strategic partners. France, remember, has an old standing relationship with the Gulf region. So, if we can combine our forces, we can then do some triangular cooperation. The UAE has the money and the dynamism, France has technology, and India has domain expertise. That's the way I see this trishul, if you like, working. We all have different strengths, the three countries, and I think if we can pool our resources, there is strategic convergence, there is no great difference of opinion. All three countries are opposed to terrorism. All three countries believe there must be moderation. The UAE is gradually emerging as the bulwark of moderation and pluralism in the Gulf. You can see a number of Indians working there. You have temples there. So I think there is a lot to be said in favor of this particular trilateral, whether it will work in the Gulf or elsewhere. I also see that India has invited the UAE as a special guest for the G20 summit. We have the right as president of G20 to invite a certain number of special guests. You will appreciate the UAE is not part of G20. Saudi Arabia is. So India has made it a point to invite UAE as a special guest for the G20 summit. The UAE is going to be hosting the COP28, Conference of Parties in Climate Change. It's already been agreed between India, UAE, France that several of the G20 events relating to climate change, sustainability will happen in India, and the three countries will cooperate. The three countries are also unconditionally committed to achievement of the goals of the Paris Climate Change 2015 Accords, which has also been mentioned in the joint statement. So I think all in all, in addition to defense security, where we are talking of co-production, joint production, and so on, and Rafale immediately springs to mind because France has supplied Rafale to the UAE as well, frankly. So there is a lot of interoperability. But in addition to security and defense, I would emphasize also climate change. They're talking of biodiversity, single-use plastic. There is a mangrove alliance which has been established by the UAE, of which India is a part as well. The Indo-Pacific Parks Initiative of France and India, I think the UAE has promised to join. So frankly, Amitabh, synergies are many between these three countries. And I think for me, I go back to the point that I made earlier. We were actually leaving a dangerous vacuum in the Gulf, with the United States gradually withdrawing from the Gulf and looking at Asia and Europe. We were actually leaving a dangerous vacuum in the Gulf with 8 million people, with oil imports and so on. So I'm particularly delighted that both I2U2 and now this minilateral will at least provide the first strategic footprints for India in this vitally important region for India.
So, if you want to just elaborate a little bit more on what you have already referred to several times in this defense security dynamic of this trilateral or Trishul, as you said, the French have a base there. They provide Rafales to both the UAE and to India. And I think there was mid-air refueling when the Air Force Rafales were coming here. All of them are here. Now there are reports of the naval version being picked up for the aircraft carrier, possibly when Macron comes. But in the light of that, Amber, another question for you from Mr. X, who says, your stance on whether Safran and HAL can really make joint production of jet engines and export to other countries. And of course, the ITEC with the NSA's meeting in the US also referred to General Electric also putting in a request for what would probably seem to be some kind of technology transfer. So it's good that on that front we have some kind of competition from the West.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Zafran, it's actually Zafran. Zafran is a French firm, and Zafran and HAL will obviously cooperate. I think the questioner is absolutely right. There are synergies. No, going back to the question you posed about defense and security, um, a few things have happened since I left Bahrain. And as I said, these are positive developments that we have. One is you've got the combined maritime force of the United States Fifth Fleet, which is based in Bahrain. And there we have sent a liaison officer who is a colonel from the Navy and who has now joined that combined maritime force. So that's a good thing that we have, that we've got this multi-nation force based in Bahrain under the leadership of the United States, and India has joined that, at least by posting a naval officer as a liaison officer to that setup. That's good. The second thing that we have to keep in mind is that if India is going to continue to import a lot of oil from the Gulf, and I don't think that is going to change anytime soon, then the sea lanes of communication become important. Keeping the sea lanes of communication, whether the Strait of Hormuz, whether it is the Bab el Mandeb, then coming on to the Malacca Strait, this becomes extremely important for India. So India cannot rely on others. So far, Amitabh, the United States has provided this as a global good. I know that we are all fond of criticizing the US now and then, that's fine. But I think we should appreciate that for a number of years, the United States made this available, keeping the sea lanes of communication open as a public good, and that it helped India enormously, frankly. Now, I think the time has come for us to also have a stake in it. Now, since India does not have the wherewithal to have 10 aircraft carriers roaming around the Indo Pacific at any given time, we have barely one. So we have no choice but to combine forces with like minded countries. And that is what we are trying to do. The United Arab Emirates, I was in Dubai yesterday, and that was just a coincidence. I didn't know I was doing this program with you, but yesterday I was at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy for talks on behalf of Jindal. The kind of work they are doing at the academy is they are dreaming big. The United Arab Emirates is now got plans to project power as a middle power. And I think it'll be great if India can combine forces with UAE. France has already got a presence in UAE, as I said earlier. The key challenge is to move from a seller buyer relationship, whether it is UAE or India. We are trying to see if we can convince France to make these Rafales and other equipment in India and the UAE, not just be happy with buying military equipment because that is going to be expensive. I think the French know this. They're acutely aware that we've been making this point in the context of Atmanirbhar Bharat and in the defense area. And I think what you will see, I'm really happy they are talking in terms of co-production. And that is, I think, extremely interesting for me. Because if India, France, UAE, as I said, with the different strengths, pool their resources, it should perfectly be possible for us to make defense equipment in either UAE or India, and then try to see if we can use it for internal consumption, also export to UAE and other countries who may need it. So I think the possibilities in the area of security and defense are exciting, but I want you to keep this big picture point in mind that the United States is pivoting to Asia. The United States is invested in Europe. The US simply will not be able to do the kind of things in the Gulf that it did 15 years ago. We cannot leave a vacuum, and I'm going to go ahead and name the dragon or the elephant in the room. Frankly, it should also be seen in the context of what China is doing. So we will need to take care of our interests. This is what I'm saying. And I think there is a convergence between the three countries, India, France, UAE, that we will have to stay invested strategically in the Gulf. Ultimately, this trilateral is about having a strategic footprint in the Gulf and investing strategically with India, France, and the UAE in the Gulf. And I think I cannot overemphasize the importance of this trilateral arrangement.
And investing in the strategic footprint in the Gulf, slightly, if I zoom out in terms of the Indo-Pacific as well, Ambassador, that's where India and France have had a lot of convergence. So the geographical location or the heft, say France, of course, in Europe, but is a very much an Indian ocean region power with the land and territory and citizens. We've had exercises with them, I think, in Reunion as well. The potential, as you said, in I think in slightly different words earlier in this interview, for the sum of these three countries to be larger than three of them individually in terms of sea
Oh,
lanes, China, etc.
oh, absolutely. I don't think I could have put it better. The sum of the three is obviously much more than the parts. You're absolutely right. I think what is happening here is that both France and India are used to working in the Indian Ocean. As you rightly said, there is Reunion Islands. We have done joint patrols in the Indian Ocean. The key in this trilateral arrangement is to rope in the UAE. The UAE may not be interested in investing stuff in the Pacific Ocean because that's far away, but the UAE will be interested in investing in the Indian Ocean. And that is critical because our definition of the Indo Pacific actually extends to the eastern shores of Africa, which includes the area of Gulf and the Middle East. This may not necessarily be the definition of United States or others, but I think both France and India firmly believe that the Indo Pacific cannot leave out this part, the Western Indian Ocean. This is critical for India and France. France, as you rightly said, is the only European country which has real estate in the Indian Ocean, as I'm fond of saying. And I think what you are seeing gradually is UAE projecting its power. The UAE was so far content to be just a power in the Gulf, an oil power, if you like, getting expats and doing its stuff. I think what you are now seeing is the UAE now has global ambitions, whether it is non oil energy, and energy has been mentioned in the joint statement. Energy is going to be key for India, UAE, and of course, France. So I think the fact that the UAE has already started thinking of non oil energy, they want to be, from what I understood yesterday in my discussions with people in Dubai, they're already thinking of solar, they're thinking of renewables. They, in fact, say that we know the COP28 that we are going to host is already attracted criticism, but they say you will see that we will make sure that this is a very forward looking COP28. That is what I was hearing from my interlocutors in UAE. So, frankly, I think the UAE's position is what is most interesting in this trilateral. India, France, you would expect it. But I think the UAE's change is very, very interesting for me because the UAE is not just now content to just stay in the Gulf. I think they're looking to project power. They're looking to influence matters. Whether and don't forget tech transfer. The joint statement also talks about technological innovation and transfer. You will appreciate, Amitabh, that the UAE has got so many tech incubators now. They want to lead the world in technological innovation. They're not just happy copying stuff from the West now. So I saw a very different UAE, Amitabh, frankly. I mean, I'd been to the UAE 5, 6 years ago when I was in Bahrain, but this time I think it's been a revelation for me. Just the kind of things they're talking about. The narrative in the United Arab Emirates has changed for sure. It's there for everyone to see. The question is, can France and India work with UAE to make its dreams possible, even while pursuing our own interests in the region?
It's very true what you're saying. Because UAE, I know they have initiatives. If you go down to towards our east, all the way with Indonesia, with Japan as well. So, like you're saying, they're trying to enlarge their footprint. Again, this is not directly related to the trilateral, but it's related to the larger picture. I'm a question from Mr. X who says, "What's your stance on infras?" This is something that Dr. Ashley Tellis had brought up, and we had spoken to him on GIST as well. Vis-a-vis AUKUS, when, as you said, talking about the elephant in the room, is that something that you do envisage in the short or long term
No,
possibility?
actually, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the context of I2U2 and this trilateral. I2U2 has already talked in terms of an agricultural, farm that they're going to have in Gujarat, and they're talking about a renew project. So there are concrete projects which they have identified in I2U2. I think in infrastructure, generally speaking, the question is, can we provide a meaningful alternative to the bread and to the Belt and Road Initiative? Frankly, it's as simple as that. The Belt and Road Initiative is based on a particular model. Can we provide an alternative to countries without just telling them that BRI is bad, China is bad? Give them viable alternatives. And I think in Quad, for example, we have actually announced a set of principles which should govern infrastructure in the world. And this is a good standard in terms of transparency, in terms of financial viability, in terms of its conformity with sustainable development and climate adherence to rules and so on. So we've actually got the principles already sorted out. The question is, can we get funding? And I think that is where, if I can put it very honestly to you, I see a role on the part of UAE, frankly. They're the ones who have funds which can be used for this purpose. And I think it's a question of other countries like France and India convincing UAE that it is as much in UAE's interest as it is in our interest to make sure that funding happens for infrastructure. The infrastructure has to be green, the infrastructure has to be sustainable, and infrastructure needs to adhere to transparency. So this is, I think, absolutely critical for me.
When you're talking about infrastructure, you're also an expert on trade. I mean, you were uh, involved with WTO as well. How does, say, an India UAE CPA or a limited or otherwise an FTA affect a larger picture? Can that be any analogy be drawn there? As in, does that affect? Can you export as a hub from there?
Yes, I think you're quite right, actually. One of the reasons why India is choosing its FTA partners with care, whether it is UAE, UK, EU, for example, and then, of course, we are seeking to join the eighth pillar of the Indo Pacific Economic Framework. But going back to what we have done with UAE, for example, of course, I expect the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement that we have signed with UAE to actually bring in massive UAE investment in India. In fact, one of the things that we are very keen is for India to provide food security to UAE and for UAE to provide energy security to India. They don't have food security. We don't have energy security as of today. Can we swap? Can we give them food security by having food parks in India, which will be exclusively, you will adopt the best standards in agriculture so that food is made available to UAE? And in return, can we have investments from UAE in India and UAE so that this can contribute to energy security? So it's a straightforward swap between food security and energy security, as I see it. A lot of complementarities that I can see between UAE and India.
Ambassador Mohan Kumar, as usual, absolute pleasure talking to you, sir. Very enlightening conversation we always have.
Thank you.
And another reminder to our viewers, at the bottom of your screen, you see our Telegram circle, which you can join. You'll get the latest updates of when we put up articles on our website or interviews like this on our YouTube channel. You can also, of course, help support us if you are inclined to do so. There's a UPI QR code which is there in the descriptor, in the YouTube descriptor, that you can log on to, and we'll also try and put it up as graphics for you to just use your mobile phones if you're so interested. This is the gist on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.